Ready, OJ? Ready.
Regarded as one of the best running backs of all time, Orenthal James Simpson rose to prominence in the 60s. While other black athletes were protesting the segregation that still existed, OJ was extending an open hand of friendship to white men and women, assimilating into white society as if it were normal at the time for black and white folks to be friends, garnering sponsorships and merchandising deals unheard of for black men at the time. Although you wouldn't have guessed it from the image he portrayed in his later years, OJ grew up in poverty. Living in the housing projects of San Francisco, he joined a street gang called the Parisian Warriors when he was just a teen. In and out of juvenile detention centers, OJ credits baseball star Willie Mays, who he met after his third arrest, with convincing him to stay out of trouble. He joined his high school football team and excelled. As an all-city football player, his poor grades in school prevented him from attracting much interest from large college recruiters. So after high school, OJ enrolled at City College of San Francisco. Being named an All-American running back and leading his team to the championship suddenly made him a much sought-after transfer student for larger colleges. Heavily recruited, Simpson chose to transfer to the University of Southern California, and under Coach McKay, he led the league in rushing yards his junior and senior years. He won the Walter Camp Award his junior year and the Heisman Trophy his senior year, holding the record for Heisman's largest margin of victory for over 51 years. He was selected first in the '69 draft by the Buffalo Bills, demanding the largest contract in professional sports history at the time of $650,000 over 5 years. OJ, nicknamed the Juice, along with his offensive line known as the Electric Company, dominated the league. Though OJ never won a Super Bowl, he was named MVP in '73, was 5-time first-team All-Pro, and a 4-time NFL rushing yard leader. Eventually traded back to his hometown of San Francisco, where he played as a 49er his final 2 years in the league. Unlike other black athletes at the time, OJ never took up stances on race issues. Afraid taking a stance would alienate him from black or white fans, it's hard to argue with his reasoning. Loved by both races at the time, this mass appeal allowed him to become the first African-American athlete to be merchandised on a grand scale and collect big paychecks as a spokesman for Hertz.
Coming or going on a business trip, you've got no time to waste. And nobody knows that better than Hertz. Whether it's picking up or dropping off your Ford or other fine car, nobody has more to do it faster.
OJ was able to dig his way out of the housing projects and become a household name, a sports superstar, beloved by the masses. But all this would be overshadowed by what was to come. In '77, while playing for the 49ers, OJ met bombshell Nicole Brown while she was working as a waitress at the Beverly Hill nightclub The Daisy. Brown at the time was just 18. OJ was 30 years old and already married to his high school sweetheart. Despite this, he and Brown began dating. 8 years later, they would marry and have 2 children, but their marriage was marred with claims of spousal abuse. According to Brown, there were around 60 incidents of abuse. She recalled a time OJ broke her arm during a fight, but she told emergency room staff that she had fallen over on her bike to protect him from legal trouble. He beat her in public during sex in front of family and friends. She called the police on him on 8 occasions, but Simpson was arrested just once for the abuse. In '89, he was charged with beating Brown and threatening to kill her. Pleading no contest to the charges, he was sentenced to 2 years probation. 7 years into the marriage, in 1992, Brown would file for divorce. After the divorce, OJ was still obsessed with Brown, stalking and harassing her. Brown says she had caught him spying on her with her new boyfriend. She reported a set of house keys had gone missing and became so terrified of OJ that on June 8th of '94, she phoned a women's shelter, telling the shelter workers that she was considering staying there because she was afraid of what OJ might do. Just 4 days after this call, Brown's life would come to a brutal end. On June 12th of 1994, Brown and OJ both attended their daughter's dance recital. Afterwards, Brown's family had gone to dinner at Mezzaluna. Simpson returned home. He had a red-eye flight scheduled that night. Due to leave at 11:45, he was heading to Chicago for a Hertz convention golf outing. A friend of Brown's, Ron Goldman, happened to be waitressing at Mezzaluna that night. After leaving the restaurant, Brown's mom realized she had left her reading glasses. Goldman offered to drop the glasses off to Brown's home when he got off work. Goldman left the restaurant around 9:50 that night, and it was the last time anyone would see him alive. 25 minutes later at 10:15, Brown's neighbor would report hearing the cries and constant barking of her dog. A dog walker in the neighborhood later came upon Brown's dog barking in the streets. The dog's legs were covered in blood and tried to follow the dog walker home. The walker tried to return the dog back to where he found it, but the dog resisted. He eventually left the dog with Brown's neighbors, who had agreed to keep him for the night. Around the same time, a limousine driver arrived to OJ's house. Set to take him to the airport for his red-eye flight, he buzzed the intercom but got no response. The house was dark and he dragged on a cigarette while calling around trying to get in touch with Simpson. The driver was told that OJ was always running late and to just wait for him. Around 11, the driver spotted a shadowy figure walking across OJ's driveway and entered the front door. Buzzing the intercom again, OJ answered, explaining that he had overslept and would be out shortly. 15 minutes later, OJ came out and loaded up his luggage and they headed to the airport. Just 30 minutes later, OJ boarded an American Airlines flight to Chicago. Back in Brown's neighborhood, her neighbors, who had agreed to hold on to the dog for the night, couldn't get the agitated canine to calm down, so they decided to return him to Brown. Now annoyed at the predicament, they approached Brown's driveway, but were stopped in their tracks. As they looked towards the front door of the house, they couldn't be sure if what they were seeing was true or just their eyes tricking them in the dark of the night. But what they were seeing was true. Outside of Brown's home lay her body, in a pool of blood. Police were called to the scene where they discovered the body of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, both brutally stabbed to death as Nicole and OJ's young children slept upstairs. A large bruise in the center of Brown's back, with a corresponding footprint on her clothing, indicated to investigators that after killing Goldman, the assailant returned to Brown's body, stood on her back, pulled her head back by the hair, and slit her throat, nearly decapitating her. A trail of bloody footprints ran through the back gate. To the left of the bloody footprints were drops of blood, apparently from the bleeding left hand of the assailant. Laying near Goldman's body was a blue knit cap, an extra-large leather glove, and the envelope containing the glasses that he was returning. After police had identified the victims of the brutal double homicide and realized it was OJ's ex-wife, LAPD officers arrived at his residence to inform him of the murder and have him come to the station to pick up him and Brown's children. At this point, it was around 5 in the morning and they buzzed the intercom at OJ's estate for 30 minutes with no answer. Looking around, the detectives spotted OJ's vehicle, parked haphazardly with what appeared to be blood on the handle. Fearing OJ may be in trouble, they scaled his gate and walked to the premises, where they spoke to a family friend who was staying in OJ's guest house, and learned that he left earlier that night for Chicago. While on the property, they discovered a blood-stained right-hand glove, later determined to be the mate of the left-handed glove they had found next to the body. The glove, later to become infamous during OJ's trial, was enough evidence for a search and arrest warrant. When police finally reached Simpson in Chicago and informed him of Brown's death, he seemed very upset about the murder, but suspiciously didn't question the circumstances. He asked if the children had witnessed the murder, but never asked if the assailant had harmed them. OJ returned to LA, where he was questioned by police. He had a cut on his finger of his left hand that he was unable to explain, but willingly gave police a sample of his DNA and was allowed to leave the police station while DNA evidence was being processed. He spent the night at his attorney and close friend Robert Kardashian's home, where they immediately began assembling a team of lawyers that would later be known as the Dream Team. 5 days after the brutal slaying, DNA results came back, linking OJ to the murder scene. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and agreed to turn himself in at noon. Hordes of media sat outside the police station waiting to capture OJ's perp walk, but noon came and went and OJ never showed. OJ was declared a fugitive and police and press began scouring LA in search of him. News helicopters searched for the now infamous white Ford Bronco he was believed to be in, and he was tracked down later that evening heading north on the 405. Going just 35 miles per hour with 20 police cruisers in pursuit, the low-speed chase was televised worldwide. 9 news helicopters flew overhead, catching the entire 2-hour police chase. Every news station played the chase, and while NBC still showed Game 5 of the NBA Finals, it was played in a tiny box in the corner of the screen as Tom Brokaw covered the chase. Spectators lined bridges and sidewalks with signs cheering on OJ in a festival-like manner, shouting, "Go, OJ, go!" The chase finally ended at OJ's Brentwood estate. When taken into custody, police found $8,000 in cash, a passport, and a disguise kit with a fake goatee in his Bronco. OJ pled absolutely, positively, 100% not guilty in the start of what would later become known as the trial of the 90s. As jury selection started, OJ's defense wanted a jury full of black women. Their thought process was, black women know the injustices that their fathers, husbands, and sons have been subjected to by the police. The prosecution also wanted a jury full of black women. Their thought process? He had married a white woman, and this would be seen as betrayal to the black women. When jury selection was finalized, there were 10 women, 8 of them black, and 2 men selected. Lead prosecutor Marcia Clark's theory was simple. OJ was still obsessed with Brown. The night of the recital, he had refused to allow his then-girlfriend to attend. After the recital, he returned home to a voicemail from his then-girlfriend, ending their relationship. Later that night, he went to Brown's home in an attempt to reconcile. She refused the offer, and in a fit of rage, she murdered her. Goldman then came upon the scene while attempting to return the glasses. He was murdered to silence any witnesses. The prosecution submitted 108 items of evidence linking OJ to the crime scene. It was OJ's blood that dripped next to the bloody footprints leaving the scene of the crime. Simpson, Goldman, and Brown's DNA was found on the inside and outside of OJ's Bronco. The bloody glove at his home had all 3 of their DNA on it. Simpson and Brown's DNA was found on a pair of OJ's socks. The victim, glove, and hat found at the crime scene all had hair consistent with Simpson's on them. Blue cotton fibers found on both victims were consistent with the shirt OJ had worn that night to the recital, but the police were unable to ever locate the shirt. FBI shoe print expert William Bodzik testified that the bloody shoe prints found at the crime scene and inside Simpson's Bronco were made from a rare and expensive pair of Bruno Magli Italian shoes. He determined the shoes were a size 12, the same size that Simpson wore, and are only sold at Bloomingdale's. Only 29 pairs of that size were sold in the U.S., and one of them was sold at the same store that Simpson often bought his shoes from. The defense argument was summarized as simply compromised, contaminated, and corrupted, arguing that the evidence was mishandled and planted by cops to frame OJ. On the stand, investigators did admit to improperly storing the evidence in plastic rather than paper bags, and leaving it unrefrigerated for up to 7 hours, which, the defense argued, allowed for bacteria to degrade the DNA. Furthermore, testing of the blood showed the preservative EDTA, which is a preservative found in police blood collection bottles. While it naturally occurs in blood, the defense argued the blood the police found at the crime scene contained too high of amounts, indicating the blood had been planted. The glove that was found in OJ's yard, well, the defense asserted that was planted by Detective Mark Furham. After picking it up at the crime scene, he transported it to OJ's estate and dropped it into his yard for him to find later as evidence. His motive, according to the defense, being the desire to become the hero of a high-profile case and racism, as the defense played audio tapes where the detective used slurs to refer to black men over 40 times. OJ's lawyer instructed him to quit taking his arthritis medicine during the trial, which caused his joints to swell up. Combined with the fact that leather shrinks when wet, the infamous glove appeared to be too small when OJ attempted to put it on.
It makes no sense. It doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
OJ's pockets ran deep, and he was able to pay expert witnesses hundreds of thousands of dollars to testify on his behalf. Forensic pathologist Michael Baden accepted a $100,000 retainer to testify that the murders happened closer to 11 p.m., which is when Simpson had his alibi, stating that Brown was still conscious, standing, and took a step after her throat was cut, and that Goldman was standing and fighting his assailant for 10 minutes with a lacerated jugular vein. After the trial, Baden admitted his claims were inaccurate and that he regretted testifying for OJ. The day the verdict was announced, more than 100 police officers on horseback surrounded the courthouse. Fearing that race riots would erupt if OJ was found guilty,
we, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson, a human being, as charged in Count 1 of the information. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Ronald Lyle Goldman, a human being, as charged in Count 2 of the information.
At 10:07 a.m. on Tuesday, October 3, 1995, Simpson was acquitted on both counts of murder. The jury arrived at the verdict after just 4 hours of deliberation. After the verdict was read, juror number 9, 44-year-old Lionel Cryer, gave Simpson a Black Power raised fist salute. The New York Times reported that Cryer was a former member of the Revolutionary Nationalist Black Panther Party that prosecutors had inexplicably left on the panel. An estimated 100 million people worldwide watched or listened to the verdict's announcement. Long-distance telephone call volumes declined by 58%, and trading volume on the New York Stock Exchange decreased by 41%. Water usage decreased as people avoided using bathrooms. So much work stopped that the verdict cost an estimated $480 million in lost productivity. After the verdict, polling showed that 75% of white Americans thought Simpson was guilty, while 70% of black Americans thought he was innocent. In the years after the trial, several books, movies, and documentaries have been made thoroughly discussing what you could call the trial of the century. OJ published a book called If I Did It, which he claims was a hypothetical confession. In 1996, he lost a civil trial to the parents of Goldman and Brown, finding him liable for their murders. The victim's family were awarded $33.5 million in damages. In 2007, OJ led a group of men into a casino where Simpson had learned some of his sports memorabilia was being sold. Armed with a gun, Simpson took back the items he believed were his. He was arrested shortly after, and unlike his murder trial, was found guilty and sentenced to 33 years in prison. He was paroled in 2017 after 9 years. In 2023, Simpson reported he had prostate cancer, and on April 10, 2024, at the age of 76, he died from complications related to the cancer.